The Choir Beyond the Fog. Part 1. The First Note. The village of Grenthollow existed on no map, and that was no accident. Nestled within the salt-heavy mists of the northern fenlands, it appeared only under certain conditions, when the tide receded just so, when the fog refused to lift for days on end, and when the air itself seemed to hum. To Mars Rourke first heard of it in the faded notes of an old a woman who vanished decades ago after her obsession with the lost harmonics of the drowned marshlands grew unbearable. Her final entry was a line scrawled in shaky ink: "The fog sings back." Rourke had dedicated his life to the study of forgotten soundsfield recordings of rituals performed in extinct dialects. Cryptic compositions scratched into stone, musical scales that spiraled into madness. When he came across that journal, yellowed and brittle, something in him moved, a low frequency beneath his thoughts, humming steadily. He followed references, old letters, whispers from the academic underground. Paths led north toward a region weathered blank by time. Locals in the surrounding countryside spoke little of the marshes. Those who dared mentioned melodies drifting through fog at dusk, choirs without faces, and warnings never to hum back. Rourke, he brought a recorder, notebooks, and a conviction born of sleepless curiosity. The journey was slow and disquieting. Birds vanished. The closer he walked to the wetlands, roads deteriorated into damp trails choked by reed and rot. The air pressed against his lungs like wet velvet. But when he finally crested a small hill and saw Grenthollow below, encircled by thick white fog like a coiled serpent, he felt an undeniable pull. The village was still, two still wooden homes, sunken at the edges, their roofs lopsided. He descended in silence, every step muffled by fog. There were no people, yet he sensed movement in the periphery, like a breath just behind his ear. Rourke entered the first structure, a chapel with a steeple rotted at the top. Inside, benches were arranged in perfect symmetry, all facing a dais where rusted instruments lay. A harp without strings, an organ with teeth-like keys, drums skinned with something too pale to be leather. On the wall behind the pulpit hung a painting, water-stained and ancient. It showed a figure with a flared mouth and no eyes, arms raised, and from its throat emerged "Bye," or something worse. Beneath it, in smudged letters, the voice that walked. Rourke touched the frame and felt it vibrate. That night, he pitched a small tent in the center of the village and waited, recorder in hand. As dusk bled into night, the fog grew denser, swallowing even the outlines of the houses. That's when it began. A low, harmonic, almost imperceptible, thrummed through the ground. Then a second note joined it, discordant but deliberate. Then another. The chords layered atop each other like the limbs of a dying creature, uneven but growing stronger. Rourke pressed record. Fog pulsed with every beat, and through it, figures emerged tall and narrow, clothed in tattered robes that shimmered unnaturally in the dim light. They moved in rhythm, but without sound from their steps. Their faces were veiled in gauze, mouths moving in silent song. Yet Rourke heard, it felt it in his ribs, in his teeth. The choir had no instruments, yet the music swelled. It was not made of notes, but of pressure, memory, and something that smelled like seawater and morning. Rourke fell to his knees. His recorder sputtered, sparked, and died. B. Then one of the figures turned toward him. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, but Rourke's mind filled with static, like a detuned radio buried beneath ice. Visions surged of submerged cathedrals, of choirs, singing to things deeper than oceans, of a note so pure it could unmake thought. When he blinked, the figures were gone. In his hand, the recorder was melted, and still, the humming continued in the back of his skull. The next morning, he found a path that had been there before, stone steps descending into the bog behind the chapel. The fog was thicker here, as if clinging to whatever lay beneath. Something compelled him forward. His dreams the night before had been filled with the same melody, repeating, until it pierced him. The journal from the vanished musicologist had mentioned a stairway beneath the hymn. He followed the steps, each footfall swallowed by the fog. The descent was longer than it should have been. Hours passed. Rourke could no longer tell if it was day or night. He emerged into a vast underground chamber lit by floating spheres. That pulsed in time with the hum. The walls were carved with notations in a language that shifted when he looked directly at it. In the center of the chamber, stood a choir, motionless and blindfolded. Dozens of them, their mouths sewn shut with a golden thread. Yet still they sang impossibly. The sound echoed in his mind, a song not of words, but of memory forgotten, as if each note pulled loose something he'd once known and buried. Rourke realized, too late, that the song was changing him. He looked at his fingers. Broom. The skin flaked away in ribbons, revealing symbols carved into bone. The conductor stepped forward. It wasn't human. Its mouth opened sideways, revealing rows of tongue-like chords. It didn't sing. It conducted his thoughts, forcing him to recall every note he'd ever heard, every regret, every echo of his mother's lullaby, every scream he'd pushed from his dreams. And then it introduced a new note, one he'd never heard before. But instantly, new had always existed in the silent spaces between all other sounds. Rourke screamed, but only fog came out, to be continued in part to the final chorus.